Hey there boys, and welcome back to another video. So for this video I'm going to be going over kind of my feelings towards raiding, at least in terms of classic and retail, because I've recently cleared all of the raid content for Wrath of the Lich King and it's on farm at this point. But I did notice a lot of things, especially me having a lot more fun in terms of the classic side of the game. So that's what this video is going to be about. Many people play World of Warcraft for different reasons, either it be gold farming, PvP, or collecting. And don't get me wrong, I play for all those kinds of aspects, but the one aspect I do enjoy the most would be raiding. Now, I've been playing the game for about 10 years now. My first real dip into raiding would be the Throne of Thunder, which in many players' eyes is one of the best raid experiences ever to have been created. And ever since then, I've loved every aspect of raiding. Which brings me to the point of this video. This is to talk about how I enjoy Wrath Classic raids much more than anything I've experienced in recent history of retail WoW. While yes, raids have gotten much more complicated over the years, they don't seem to feel or have the same scale as the older ones. I find myself to be enjoying the not so freshly released Naxxramas in Wrath Classic, as well as the other raids in Phase 1. To preface this video, Classic Wrath is my first time playing Classic in any capacity, so I can't really speak on previous Classic iterations such as Vanilla or Burning Crusade, but I can say that Wrath is probably the most fun I've had in WoW for a while. Now, I can already hear some of you guys typing in the comments that a lot of the bosses for Naxxramas only have one, maybe two mechanics if you're lucky, and how that can't be any fun, and I completely understand. For some classes, such as ranged, on say a fight like Patchwork, you literally have threat being the only mechanic you have to worry about. And for Lotheb, all you have to do is collect a spore buff and deal damage to him. While not being the most exciting, I feel like the scale as well as just the loot itself feels so much better. I'll explain the loot aspect a little later in the video, but let's start with just the mechanics. For example, let's take Mythic Shriekwing, the first boss of Castle Nathria, which is usually the most free boss of any raid tier, being the first. Shriekwing has 10 different mechanics off the top of my head that you have to worry about, and if you mess maybe half of them up, it's an insta-wipe for the raid. Now if you look at Naxxramas, the Arachnid and Plague Quarter have 10 mechanics for all of their bosses combined. And even if a good amount of your raiders do mess up, you're still most likely going to kill the boss. I remember a time a couple weeks ago where I was the last DPS alive on the 4 Horsemen fight, and we were still able to get it down, which is near unheard of in anything with retail, which made for a much more fun and, dare I say, epic feeling to the raid. What I'm trying to say is yes, many of these bosses to retail players may seem extremely easy and forgiving, but that does not take away from how fun most of these bosses are. Challenge does not mean fun, not in every aspect. Sometimes the bosses can just be fun to be fun, and that's where I find myself playing Classic. As I previously said in the last section of the video, loot is another factor that gets most people raiding, and it feels good to get a new item, especially if it's your best in slot. Let's start off with how retail feels. When I get a piece of gear in retail, I can't just slap that bad boy on and feel good that it's an upgrade. No, I have to tab out and use a program or a website that will use calculations to help me see if it even is an upgrade compared to the gear I already have. If you're like me and try to get the best gear possible, that's fine, but for a lot of players, even for me at some points, it's not fun to get a piece of gear and wonder if it's better than what you've already got after you math everything out. When I get a piece of new gear in Classic, you bet I feel like a goddamn champion when I get a new piece of gear. Don't get me wrong, there are times where you will have to look up if it is a better piece of gear, and I don't mind that, but it's not anywhere near retail. One reason for this is probably just the sheer amount of gear that you get while playing retail. You're throwing purples and epics all the fucking time in the game, and it just doesn't help. Now Classic is a lot easier to gear up as well. Raiding gives the best loot, it's simple as that. You don't have Mythic Plus giving you some pieces of gear that are better over there, while raiding has some other better pieces over here. You literally have a linear path that will get you to the gear you want. Staying on the topic of that linear path, 25 is the tip-top gear you can get right now, and it's as simple as that. While yes, there are different bits of 25 man gear that can go in a slot, there are definite better pieces to get compared to others. Another reason I like the loot in Classic is just you feel much more powerful when you get that gear. Retail WoW has also kind of made it to where gear doesn't feel as good. You're not doing as much damage. Everyone's kind of on the same playing field, and it's more dependent on the class than the gear itself in most cases. Another thing I like about loot in Classic is how you can see what drops from after a boss has died. With personal loot in retail, you kind of just see it pop up in a chat bubble, but when you can bend down and look at the loot that came from the boss itself, there's an aura of anticipation waiting for everybody to roll on this piece of gear. And that's just a feeling that not just me for my gear I feel, but for other people's when you see their bis drop as well, and you know how excited they are. But in reality, gear is gear, it's going to be replaced, but in Classic it just feels like a much bigger upgrade than it does in retail nowadays. Another aspect that I feel makes Classic much more enjoyable are the players themselves. In retail you usually have around 15 players, consisting of 2 tanks, 3 to 4 healers, and a multitude of DPS, which 99% of the time is the raid makeup. In Classic, however, you're going to be doing 10 or 25 man, which for me, 25 man is where you get really fun compositions. You have, again, 25 other people playing with you, which to me feels a lot better than seeing maybe 15 people on a retail raid. There's also much more flexibility in what you can bring. Hell, some fights you may want 3 or 4 tanks in the raid, which is almost never heard of in retail, mostly because you probably won't finish the boss before the enrage if you are 1 DPS down. I do understand, however, that's more of a mythic problem than it is a heroic. The last aspect is going to be the time investment for these kills. Let's take Sylvanas for example. The fastest kill in Sylvanas is around 8 minutes across all difficulties, mostly because people will bring over geared people and just do a quick fight. But 8 minutes is going to be the quickest one that I've found. If you take into consideration all things that could go wrong in a fight, those 8 minutes you have to start over again if you guys wipe, which is quite disheartening to go through that again. While in Classic, most bosses there's no more than a 5-minute timer, mostly because they'll just enrage and kill everybody. This makes wiping feel less tedious in my opinion. Now, both sides of WoW have their positives and negatives, but it's mostly up to the person to decide whether they like the more complicated or they like the more simpler version of doing these bosses. And that's going to be it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.